Welcome back everyone. Hi, hello. I feel like I can chill out a bit now. I've just had to film another video where I've had to be very serious and somewhat professional, whereas now we're doing this, I feel like I can actually chill out a bit. So hello, hope you're doing well. Thanks for clicking on this video. Thank you for being here. I recently realised that it's been 5 years since I started my blog, and thinking about it, I actually got really emotional and I ended up doing a bit of a soppy Instagram post about it, because the crux of it all is that blogging really changed my life. It was just something little. I decided to do it on a complete whim pretty much. I explained this in the post, but I had a night of insomnia, which isn't out of the ordinary for me. Decided midway through that you know what, I'm going to start a blog. All of that said, I really don't think I am an example of how to be a good blogger. There are so many things that I don't do that I know I should be doing, and there are so many ways that I know my blog falls short. I'm definitely not the most professional blogger in the technical sense. For me, it was more about my love of writing. It all seems to hinge on the writing element more than anything else for me. That's the bit I really love, and that's the bit that I really think has helped me move forward. So I did go back and forth over whether I actually wanted to do this, but people do ask me a lot about starting a blog, and I would always encourage anybody who's even debating it to go for it. Please go for it. I asked on Instagram for any questions you had, and I would do my best to answer them in a video. So I feel like I do need to caveat this by saying I am not the most qualified person to be answering these questions. I have pretty much been winging it for the last 5 years, but I hope it's somewhat helpful, and I hope if nothing else it encourages you to consider giving it a go yourself. When I did look at the questions, it also became apparent quite early on that it was probably wise to highlight the different reasons why somebody might be blogging. In my head, there are kind of 3-ish main reasons why people might want to start blogging and putting their work out there. The first is simply just to have that space to write and to share your thoughts and feelings. The second is as a gateway into perhaps a career or more professional opportunities in a certain field. And the third is perhaps to lean into the content creation / influencer side of things. And they aren't always as clear cut as they sound. So for me, I started off purely because I wanted that space to write and I needed a bit of happiness back in my life. That in turn then led to it opening up opportunities, and it actually helped me to get my first job. And then that in turn led to more of the content creation / influencer side of things. So they all kind of seem to lead on. So if you're sat here thinking, well, I don't really fit into one of those categories neatly at the minute, don't worry about that. And also equally know that if you're starting out in one, there is every chance that it might lead to another one of them. The first questions were, how do you get started? Like, do you make a website? If you're completely new to blogging, I think my best advice would be perhaps to look into the free platforms that are out there, just so you can get a taste of what it would be like to do this kind of thing and create this kind of content, and you're not having to commit to paying for a domain or hosting or anything like that, because there's going to be plenty of time for that further down the line. So I think when I first started out, I used Blogger. I think, oh, that came out a bit weird, didn't it? Blogger. I think Blogger's still knocking about, and that is a free platform. It's very easy to use. The only downside is that your domain, so your website name, will have like .blogger or .blogspot in it. So for example, my domain that I have now is lifeofpippa.co.uk, whereas back then it would have been lifeofpippa.blogspot.com or something like that. Or perhaps if you feel like you have stuff to share but you're not quite ready to take that step yet, you could also consider using social media as a mini blog of sorts. You do have character limits, but that can be a nice way of testing out just how much you enjoy the process. That can be a nice way of easing into it. When I did start that process upgrading, I think after about a year of having my blog, I did ask a web designer to help me, and I had some branding done, I had a logo designed. I've changed that a few times since then. And they are extra costs, so they wouldn't be suitable for somebody starting out or who doesn't feel certain, and it might not be that you have the money to invest in that at this stage. But depending on how you get on, I think it's important that you know that there are people out there who can help. Something I found from blogging for many years is that you get so many spam emails about web designers, so many spam emails in general, and it can be tricky to figure out who you can trust and who you can't. So I'm going to leave the details of my web designer, James, down below, because he's been so brilliant. He has a chronic illness himself. I've worked with him for years and years and years, actually since before my blog. He did my Spoonie Survival Kits website as well. And I think if you too are somebody who struggles with the techie side of things, having that point of contact, I mean, I've emailed James so many times and been like, oh my God, James, I've broken everything, please help me. That can be invaluable as well. All of that said, all of the platforms are very easy to use, so once you've got those baseline things set up, it's simply a case of just clicking new post and then you're good to go. You've got this blank screen in front of you, this beautiful blank screen in front of you, and then it's over to you. You can write whatever your heart desires. The next question is, how do you choose subjects that stand out, or is it better to just speak from the heart and not worry about that? Again, I think this one heavily depends on your reasons and your intentions for blogging. So if it's purely for you as kind of like a release, your own space where you just want to share whatever you want to share, definitely speak from the heart. And I think that's where it's always come from with me. Whereas if you're approaching this with a more business-like mindset, I think the thing I would encourage you to consider within the chronic illness sphere is there something that you were struggling to find back when you were new to chronic illness? Was there something that you were looking for and you couldn't see anybody talking about? Is that something that you could shed light on? Or is there anything that's been particularly unique to your experience? Not just directly related to your health, but how your health interacts with your life as a whole as well. I think they can make really valuable posts because there probably is somebody else who's looking for the exact same thing and you could be the person who really helps them. As for choosing subjects, I'm going on the assumption that anybody watching this, their brain will probably work in a similar way to mine, and I think my answer is I don't really choose subjects. So I have the joys of a brain that's constantly chattering away at all hours of the day. It's just a case of tuning into whatever my brain is banging on about at any given time, because more often than not, I don't know, I've been thinking about this a lot recently and I might talk about this more another time, but it's almost as if my brain is just constantly writing blog posts in its head. So any thought I experience, my brain automatically thinks about how I might word that and communicate that to other people, which is quite strange, and it's only something I've realised quite recently. But the example I always use is that when I go to rest and I'm supposed to be having complete rest, I think about whatever my brain happens to be chattering away with at any given time, and that usually gives me the pull. I usually feel the pull to turn that into a blog post, so it just kind of comes innately, really. So I would say don't be afraid to listen to what your brain is innately trying to tell you, because often that's where the best and most authentic ideas come from. Were you nervous about sharing your story online for people who might see it? So this is a funny one, because I have never had any problem with sharing my story online among thousands and thousands of strangers. That is perfectly comfortable for me. I don't worry about that. Whereas the idea of anybody who I know in real life seeing it fills me with complete dread. And I kept my blog secret for many years, so nobody who I knew in real life or people who I knew pre-illness knew that I was doing the blogging. They've never known about my other social media. I've been on social media in the chronic illness community for much longer than I've been blogging. And that's always something I saw as a very distinct and separate part of my life. And I just think it's funny because I'm sure I won't be the only one who feels much more comfortable sharing their story and their work with thousands of strangers rather than one person in real life. That balance has shifted a bit now because more and more people who I know in real life and from my former life have now found the blog. But I do think you get more comfortable with it in time. And after all, what you're sharing is your real and lived experience. We internalise this idea that chronic illness is something to be ashamed of, or we're not allowed to talk about it. Whereas through that process, I've found that it can actually help you grow in confidence and self-belief and feel more comfortable being more open about these things. This next question is an interesting one, and it's what should I share and what should I not share, as I don't want to be too negative, which I thought was a really interesting way of wording this question. What I really believe is that if you're presenting your ideas in the right way, there's no real way of being too negative, and I don't think that's something that you should be overly worried about. Because even if you're sharing experiences that aren't 100% positive, or you're sharing something that's been really difficult or traumatic, being able to share that and communicate your lived experience, again, with authenticity and integrity, I don't think is an inherently negative thing. And without going into a deep dive, again, I think that's quite, that belief is quite representative of the fact that so many of us have faced so much gaslighting simply about living with and talking about chronic illness, that we've been made to feel as though talking about the real and genuine struggles we experience is somehow negative or not okay, when in reality what we know with absolute certainty is that knowing that other people are going through the same can actually be massively comforting, and even that process of writing down and sharing those emotions can be an immensely positive thing for somebody who's living with it day to day. At the end of the day, the glorious thing about blogging is that it is very much your space on the internet. It's your space to use exactly how you wish. And if you feel compelled to share something, I would encourage you to lean into that and not to worry about being too negative, because it's your space and you can use it however you wish to use it. Also, I promise I'm going to move on. Also, I was just going to say, I can't think of I can't think of any example of any chronic illness blogger where I've stopped reading their post because their post is too negative. I read posts from people who've gone through really difficult and really troubling things, and even when they're sharing that, I just feel so much respect for them for being able to share that and to communicate that so beautifully. And I've never once thought, oh, this is too negative for me, I'm opting out. And I really think other people would be the same as well. So I really just wouldn't let that put you off. The next question is about balance of health and blogging and work type stuff and getting ideas. So the thing about blogging generally is that it's all well and good saying, oh yeah, it's great to be posting loads of content, to be keeping on top of all of the trends, to be doing this, this and this. But when you're dealing with a chronic illness, you know all too well that you could wake up on any given day and you could have all the motivation in the world, but if your body says no, then it's a no. It's funny because I think content creation has evolved a lot over the last few years, whereas it used to be something that was very indulgent and it used to be something that complemented people's lives, whereas people who make it a part of their job now see it as something much more rigid and much more compulsory with less flexibility. And while there are benefits to approaching things in that way, I think that if you're going to be doing something like this with a debilitating chronic illness, it really pays to be flexible. Because I think if you're seeing writing and creating content as a burden or something you've got to tick off your to-do list, I really think that influences the way you approach it. And it's not just that it might affect the quality of what you're producing, but I just think it takes a lot of the fun out of it. And ultimately, if you're doing something like blogging, it should be fun and rewarding and cathartic for you. And the other really brilliant thing as well is that if you have an audience of people with chronic illnesses, they will know better than anybody else that flexibility is a necessity with your lifestyle. I don't know if I'm going to say this, and I don't know if I'm going to leave it in because it's probably a bit controversial. But just know that I'm saying this as somebody for whom blogging and content creation is a big part of their life, it's a part of their job, it's part of their income. I think it's really important to keep sight of the bigger picture. And although blogging and social media can be really influential in changing the narrative of particular situations and changing the way people see the world, and there is a lot of responsibility that comes with that sometimes, if you don't post a social media post on a certain day, it's really not the end of the world. It's really all quite futile in the grand scheme of things. Producing online content, it's valuable when you can do it, but please don't beat yourself up if you don't miss it, because honestly, the world will keep on turning. And also, with disability and chronic illness, we often have to put pressure on ourselves for so many other things, and we have to deal with so many invisible barriers that I really think something like blogging shouldn't be adding to that pressure. It shouldn't be one of those. It shouldn't be taken away from your life, it should be enhancing it. I think that's what I was trying to say. Oh, this is kind of similar actually. The next question is, do you follow a posting schedule or just whenever you feel like it? Again, this is another one of those situations where what I do isn't really compatible with what's seen as good practice. So if your intention is to grow an audience and to grow a platform, I suppose the best advice is to follow a posting schedule and to focus on engagement and stuff like that. Whereas I do not follow a posting schedule. I really don't. I'm a lot more chilled out about it. I will say that I usually draft my posts in advance. I'll usually write them, I'll scribble them in the notes on my phone one day, and then I will probably look back at it the next day and look at it with fresh eyes. And then the one thing I do, and even if you can't post consistently, I think this is quite valuable to do, is you can figure out the best time for posting on social media like Instagram. And I suppose this applies to blogging to an extent as well if you're looking at your analytics. You can look and figure out what time your audience is most online, how active they are at particular times and on particular days. I think if you've got your Instagram account in creator or business mode, you can see that in your analytics. Again, it's not a rigid rule, and I know that my audience, so I usually post at 7 p.m. on a weekday. Not every week, oh god no, not every weekday. Maybe once or twice a week, 3 times if I'm really on a roll. I usually post at 7 p.m. and I know from my insights that it would be even better if I posted at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. or later in the day. But that's another decision where I've weighed up the benefits of posting at people's most active times versus the drawbacks on my own health. And because I like to switch all of my social media and technology off at least a couple of hours before I go to bed, because sleep disturbance 7 p.m. was a compromise. And I think that's just one example of many, many ways where you can look at what best practice would be, but then sometimes you might have to take tweaks or look at it in a bit more of a chilled out way to make it work with you and your situation. So long story short, no, I don't follow a posting schedule. I look at what's best practice, and where I can make that work, I will, but if I don't beat myself up about it. This person says, I run a chronic illness blog, but I struggle to find readers. Do you have any tips? Something you might not know is that there are lots and lots of chronic illness bloggers out there, and not all of them use social media. So a lot of them have really brilliant websites, but they rely on things like SEO, which is where people will search for a particular term in a search engine and their blog post might pop up. I think if you are really committed to growing an audience, I think leaning into social media is a really good thing to do. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but I think most of your potential audience will be found on places like Instagram. Again, I'm not good practice here because I think TikTok is the really big one now, and I just don't feel any compulsion to do TikTok. If you're approaching things more business minded and you're looking at it as more like a careers thing, Twitter is a good one. There are lots of different Twitter chats with different hashtags. And then one that I've discovered over the last few years that I never would have thought of is LinkedIn. So obviously not every post is going to be suitable for LinkedIn, especially if you've got that for work contacts. So I wouldn't be sharing something like, here's my review of Kinky Boots. I wouldn't be sharing that on LinkedIn. But if you have posts that are kind of more related to, so for example, I talk about having a freelance career alongside a chronic illness, that can be a really cool way, because posts get shared around a lot on LinkedIn. That can be a really cool way of having your posts reach contacts outside of that immediate circle. Also, with regard to social media, if you are a chronic illness blogger, there are Facebook groups where people can share their latest posts and they can support each other, and there's usually a really lovely vibe if you find the right groups. So I would recommend chronic illness bloggers on Facebook and also UK disabled bloggers. This person says writing advice would be great and how to structure posts. So last year on Instagram, I asked about I did a Q&A about writing advice, and I bet nobody remembers, but I got a load of really brilliant questions and I thought I'd do a video about it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realised it wasn't the right time for me to be making that video, because I couldn't do it with integrity. Not so much that I couldn't do it with integrity, it's more that there's been a real change in my ability to write at the minute, and I think I need to sit with that a little bit longer to really make a good job of it. I'm going to link a blog post below where I talk a bit more about that. That's been quite a big part of my last year, and it's something that I'm only just feeling all right enough to talk about. That's been a whole other shebang. As for structuring your posts, there are no real set rules for best practice. That's a lie. There are rules for, it's just another one of those things. If you're wanting to do it properly, so to speak, there are things you can do. So people usually encourage you to do blog posts with different headings, so it's easy for people to skim and find the information they want. And best practice is also to aim for short paragraphs rather than big chunky ones. That's something that I had to learn because I'm very much in the big chunky paragraph camp. As with anything though, it is your own space. You can do with it what you wish. For me, usually my ideas come to me and I'll usually have a title in mind before I start writing the post. So I will get a Word document, I'll write that title down, I'll perhaps write some quick bullet points underneath to make sure that I've got all the points I want to cover in there, think about how I want to order them. And then from there, just go all in and just start writing. You could, again, this is why I'm not best placed to advise. Like, I still usually try and write it all in one big wallop when I know the most sensible thing to do would be to tackle it one point at a time and make sure you're resting and pacing yourself. And I think in terms of writing process, you will quickly find what works best to you. And again, I would encourage you to really enjoy and indulge in that process rather than seeing it as something that you really have to get right and nail. It's not about being perfect, it's about being authentic, I would say. The next two questions are similar, and it's how do you get it from being a hobby to a job, and how have you started your freelance business? This person says, I can't work 9 till 5 job anymore, EDS life sucks. The first thing I feel like I have to say is that if you can't work a 9 till 5 job, then freelance isn't your only option anymore. It used to be that way. Shameless plug, I work for a really lovely small charity called Astrid. Please come and say hello and we'll happily help you if that's something you're interested in. If you're feeling like you need to go freelance because it's your only option, I just want people to know that it isn't your only option. So I'll leave Astrid's details down below. And similarly, I did do a whole video about how I found work in the charity sector. And as I was thinking about this question, I thought a lot of the points I would share here, I've covered in much more detail in that other post. So I'm going to put that in a card somewhere. I'll link that below as well. And it's basically about how I started blogging as a hobby, and then as I've continued that and as it's evolved over the course of gaining experience in the charity sector and in different roles, I started off in employment, and I gradually reduced the amount of employed and I increased the amount of self-employed I did until it got to a point where I was able to move into completely self-employed. And again, I think that lends itself well to chronic illness. Often you do have to be very careful about these things. You have to make sure that financially it's a good option for you, health-wise it's a good option. And it's all about kind of making that change incrementally in a safe and sustainable way. Any advice for how to hear about opportunities to work with organisations? I think that depends on the type of organisation you're looking to work for. My interpretation of this was perhaps more on the job career side of things, perhaps working with a business or a charity or a social enterprise. But then I'm also aware that that person could also mean like the brand side of things as well, the influencer side of things. If you're looking for opportunities with brands, again, there are lots of good Facebook groups floating out about there. Off the top of my head, there's things like UK influencer opportunities, that's quite popular. Also, I wrote this down because it's important. My number one tip, if you are starting a blog with a view to it opening up opportunities, whatever they might be, please, please, please make sure you have your email address everywhere. Put it absolutely everywhere it can go. You might want a contact form on your website, and that's fine, but even if you've got a contact form, make sure you've got your email address visible as well. Make sure that if people want to work with you and they want to contact you, you need to make that as easy as possible for them to do to encourage them to work with you. And as somebody who's done a bit of work on the other side of the table, I cannot emphasise enough how important that is. The other thing is that when you start blogging, while on the one hand there are things you need to do to be proactive if you want to make connections and to network with other people, there are a lot of PRs out there, and their job is to find amazing people like you to work with. So if you're creating the content you want to create and you are a good fit for an opportunity, the chances are that the PR in charge of that opportunity will find a way of finding you some way. If, on the other hand, you're wanting to work with organisations, so charities and non-profits or businesses in a certain sector, I don't like to encourage unpaid work, but if you're looking for experience and you're looking to make those initial connections, if you reach out to, say, a charity or a non-profit or a local organisation and you say, hi, this is me, I do a bit of writing, I'd love to guest blog for you sometime, they will snap you up. I'm telling you right now, they will snap you up, because that is such an asset for people, for businesses to have somebody with lived experience willing to share their story and create content for you that has a storytelling element to it. That's absolutely invaluable. I think what I'm trying to say there is don't be afraid to reach out and put yourself out there. They might come looking for you, but there's no harm at all in putting yourself out there. And I will do a cheeky plug here because I wrote an ebook called How to Network Online, and in that I delve a bit more into the kind of language and the way of structuring those kinds of outreach emails and making those connections online. So I'll leave a link below to that in case that's of any interest to anybody. How do you start monetizing from blogging? First and foremost, I'm going to plug another resource here. My friend Jenna Farmer runs a site called the Blog Lancer, and I recommend that to everybody because there is some absolutely amazing information on there about how to turn blogging into a job, how to monetize, all of that kind of stuff. She has some really brilliant resources and she can say things much better than I can, so I'm going to leave that link below as well. I suppose in my head there's kind of 3 different routes into monetizing from blogging. You could have adverts running on your website so that when people visit your site you gain AdSense money from that, or another platform of advertising. You could be selling products or services. For example, oh, that's quite a nice follow-on actually. I have my ebooks, I have my spoonie necklaces, I have my books that I've written. People sell things like, I'm reluctant to use the word merchandise because I'm not quite sure how I feel about that, but people sell products of that nature. Some offer services like editing, proofreading, stuff like that. So it could be worth thinking about what you as a person could offer and how that might sit alongside the blogging that you want to do. And then the third one is kind of like the sponsored social media posts, the influencer posts, the events, that kind of thing. I started off with ads on my blog and I removed them because it didn't quite feel like the right fit for me, but I do sell products and services, and I do lean into the influencer opportunities, and I don't mind telling you I absolutely love it. I really enjoy working with brands, you love, and producing content you really enjoy. Oh, it's the best thing. It really is. And this is another one that follows on nicely. Do you ever reach out to brands or do they come to you? A bit of both. These days they mostly come to me, but all of that said, I think we really need to remove this stigma about people reaching out to brands and being proactive about it, especially if you're in the disability or chronic illness community, where the sad fact of the matter is that you can be a little bit overlooked sometimes. So let me think of an example. Towards the end of 2020, I knew that I wanted to write a post about cold sensitivity and ME because it's something that I personally really struggle with, and I think it's often a lot more debilitating than people realise. And one of the ways that I manage my cold sensitivity is by using thermal clothing, and there's a brand that I really love called Heat Holders, who I've used for probably like over a decade now. And I just felt the compulsion to reach out to Heat Holders and say, hey, I'm writing this post. I wondered whether you ever work with bloggers. Would you be interested in collaborating? And that led to a conversation. They sponsored the post. They really kindly sent me some goodies, which was like the happiest day of my life because I love them so much. And the thing about reaching out to brands in that way is that you really have to demonstrate how it will be mutually beneficial. I think we need to remove this idea that reaching out to brands is people just trying to grab free stuff or make money or like capitalize on other people. It's really not about that, because when you produce content that resonates with you, resonates with them, it really is mutually beneficial. The content I shared, it led to a lot of sales for them, and they were very happy, and I was very proud of that, and they were such lovely people. So it was a lovely thing. So when you're really working with brands that align with your interests and you're producing content you're proud of, that is the bottom line. It's mutually beneficial. Again, there are also Facebook groups out there where you can put yourself forward for opportunities. There are different newsletters you can sign up for. I feel like Jenna's probably going to have more information on that somewhere, so I'll have a look and I'll try and link that below. I really think it's worth, if you are wanting to lean into the branded stuff, I really think it's worth considering which are the brands or organisations or campaigns that really align themselves with you and your interests. It's a little bit cheesy, but I have a list of top 10 on my phone of the ones that are like absolute bucket list collaborations. Without sounding really cheesy, I think if you're really enjoying the content you're creating and you're just being yourself and you're just enjoying it, I don't think it's naive to think that those opportunities might find their way to you. I think because I've been filming so long, I think I'm going to make this the last one, and maybe we'll do this again some other time. But this is a really interesting question to end on. And it says, do you feel like the fast pace of the influencer world works against your fatigue? And the answer is a categorical yes. Something I've been working on recently is kind of detaching myself from that online world where it really is 24/7. And sometimes, I'm sure there'll be other people who can relate to this, sometimes when something happens or there's some kind of situation or drama or something in the news, it can feel as though you really need to jump and be on it straight away, especially if you're a content creator. You can feel as though you need to be reacting. Sometimes it almost feels as though you need to be putting out a statement so that people know where you sit. In the past, I was definitely guilty of that, and I really felt like I had to speak out about every single thing. And while I do think it's important for anybody who has a platform to be speaking out on issues that matter and that are affecting people, I've really changed the way I approach it now. I think for me personally, I would much rather take some time, step away and really think about and mull over the issue and produce something that might not be as immediate, but will hopefully still add value and facilitate a conversation. And I think not only does that appeal to me more obviously in terms of health and having to write with fatigue, which is an absolute blooming nightmare, let me tell you, I think that aligns with kind of me as a person and how I'm maturing as well. So I think it's a really individual thing, and I can't sit here and say, I don't think I'm sitting here and saying there isn't a place for that, because I often get all kinds of FOMO when that sort of thing happens. But again, I think it's about weighing up the benefits of doing that versus the drawbacks it might have on your health, and considering how you can get the balance right between the two. I think ultimately what all of this stems down to is, yes, there's good practice out there, and yes, there are things that could really enhance your work and get you out there. But there's also your health to consider, your mental health, your physical health. I really strongly feel that it should be an enjoyable experience, even if you are doing it for a work perspective, because blogging and social media kind of aligns so nicely with your wider life and who you are as a person. I really do think you have to look at it in a different way sometimes. And like I said, there's so much you can dive into and there's so much you can mull over, but ultimately I cannot recommend just putting yourself out there and just starting and just figuring out how you can make it work for you, how you can really get the most out of it, perhaps where you would like to go with it, or perhaps taking that pressure off altogether. It's such an individualised thing, but please, 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 if that thought has ever entered your head, please start blogging in whatever way is most accessible to you, because you never know where it might lead. It is probably the best decision I have ever made in my life. It's something I love. It's something that brings me happiness. And the community I've built matters to me more than anything else. That's more important than any opportunity that might come up. Just having that community is invaluable. I can't describe how much it means to me. And I really don't know if any of this has been helpful. I've been talking for such a long time. I've been waffling on. I really hope there's something you've been able to take away from it. And thank you so much for watching and for your ongoing support. I've been a bit emotional recently thinking about blogging and thinking about how it's changed everything. So thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And now I need to go and have a cup of tea. If you'd like another one of these videos, or if perhaps there's something more specific you would like to focus on, please let me know and I will do what I can. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. You can subscribe if you want, and I will see you next time.